The Festival of India is designed to celebrate Indian heritage, but with a very clear focus on how it can help us drive the future. We really want the world to know that the age of Indian ideas is now here. Ideas from our past, ideas from our present, and ideas for our future. India is well on its way to reclaiming its place in the world order. Of course, we have many, many challenges. And it's here that if we actually look towards our heritage and our history, there are solutions to be found. And this is what the Festival of India wants to celebrate.
We have journalist, thinker, and writer extraordinaire Hindol Sengupta, who will be talking about his new book on Guru Gobind Singh Ji, in a session titled, Can a Warrior Be a Poet? Hindol.
It is indeed a real pleasure to talk about this subject today because, as many of you might know, this marks the 350th year of the birth of Guru Gobind Singh. He's a very interesting character. And a dear friend of mine told me when I told them that I was writing a book on Guru Gobind Singh, that this marked the final Punjabification of me after 20 years in Delhi. Because how else would a Bengali, ladies and gentlemen, how else would a Bengali ever dream of writing a book on Guru Gobind Singh? But after 20 years of living in Delhi and eating its samosas and kulchas and chole bhatures. It's a real pleasure to be here to talk about Guru Gobind Singh, because so much of what defined this man's life actually happened not very far away from here. Let's take one example, very close to where you're sitting today. One summer, a man is brought in chains into the city of Delhi and into what we call today Chandni Chowk. In fact, even at that time, it was called Chandni Chowk, only it had no resemblance of what we understand as Chandni Chowk today. It didn't look like what it looks like today and didn't smell surely like what it smells like today, and so on and so forth. This man was brought in chains to Chandni Chowk for one particular reason. When he was brought into Delhi, he was given an option. Either he could see his closest associates die one after the other, and then, of course, be killed himself, or he could convert. He could convert and accept the complete supremacy of the emperor who ruled over Delhi. This man's name was Guru Tegh Bahadur. Guru Tegh Bahadur did a very interesting thing. He's one of the first people who wrote a chit, a little piece of paper who we all used to use to cheat in school, the same thing. Guru Tegh Bahadur, of course, did not use it for the same reason, but he's one of the first people in recorded history in India who wrote one. Why did he write one? He was told that if he would not accept the supremacy of the emperor, then he must accept that he himself was truly divine. Because, of course, if you don't accept that the emperor is divine and the God that the emperor worships is divine, then you must be divine. How do you prove that you're divine? If you are divine, you must be able to do a miracle. Surely you can do a miracle and prove that you're divine. Guru Tegh Bahadur then, after he had seen his associates, one of whom was thrown into a cauldron of, some say oil, some say water, and burned alive in front of him. The incident with which my book begins, was sawn. Not sawn like that, ladies and gentlemen. Sawn. So a saw was taken and they began at the genitals until they cracked open the skull. He saw all of these things. Then they told him, you have two choices. Either prove that you're divine or accept the supremacy of our God and the emperor. So he said, I will write in this little piece of paper. He said, give me a little piece of paper. So they brought him paper. He said, I will write what we today would call a mantra, but a little spell, so to speak. And I would fold it and keep it, and nothing you do can do any harm to me. And they said, oh, really? And promptly chopped his head off. When they chopped his head off, they asked for the pouch to be opened and the paper to be read. What did the paper have, ladies and gentlemen? The paper said, I gave my head, but I did not give my self-worth, my respect, and I did not give, they could not make me bow. I preferred to give my head instead. That's what that little chit of paper said. And that's how I begin my book called The Sacred Sword of Guru Gobind Singh, with the idea that it all began with a little piece of paper. But something more interesting happens after that. So where are we at the point in the story? There is a chopped off head that has rolled off. Where does the head go, ladies and gentlemen? The head is smuggled out of Delhi, out of Chandni Chowk, by a water bearer and smuggled to a distance, a little distance from us, where, imagine this, a 9-year-old boy is playing in the fields with his friends. This boy, suddenly one day, is called and told, come quickly, there is a messenger who has brought word about your father. The boy comes, excitedly, because he hadn't seen his father for a long time. And he's brought into this tent, and there is this dusty, bedraggled, blood-soaked messenger who had been attacked on the way. And he looks at this man and he says, where's my father? So the man drops a sack in front of the boy, this 9-year-old boy. And the sack opens. And out of that sack rolls out the severed head of the father of the boy. In an instant, Gobind Rai becomes Guru Gobind Rai, the 10th Guru of the Sikhs. In that instant, he's still not Guru Gobind Singh, remember. That would happen a little later. That would happen in one day, since we're on the topic of severed heads. On one Baisakhi, everybody in Delhi understands Baisakhi. On one Baisakhi day, here is this man who gathers all these people around him. And the man has already, this young man has already built a bit of a legend around him. What are the things he can do? They say that he is the greatest archer after Arjun himself. After Arjun, there has been no greater archer in Indian history than Guru Gobind Singh. There is an almost perhaps apocryphal tale told of him when he's been attacked in his rampart, so to speak. And he's looking at these Mughal warriors gather around his fortresses. And I imagine in my book, because, if you match the timings, that he perhaps has an eyeglass. And remember, Guru Gobind Singh is not amazed by the eyeglass. He does not have, in Indic tradition, any problems in accepting what many in Europe found impossible to accept, which were the words of Galileo Galilei. So there he is, watching these troops gather and the warriors gather. And they say Guru Gobind Singh, from on top of one fort, was able to fire an arrow. And there were these two Mughal generals sitting on this cot, which broke only the legs of the stool, of the cot. And the generals literally came down crashing to the ground. But maybe it's apocryphal. But by the time the Baisakhi comes around and he calls all these people, there is a bit of a legend about this man. On Baisakhi Day, as many of you might know, there are great celebrations that happens in the Punjab. After the celebrations, there is a tent. And this guru, the 10th Guru of the Sikhs, then says, I want anyone of you, all of these people who have gathered, who is willing to give their life for me? Who will give their head? And there is silence. And then one by one, each of them, I told a Bengali friend of mine when I was writing this book and I was writing this chapter, he said something about labor class. So I was like, funnily enough, you will notice in the great legends of the Sikhs, all the people who stood up and went into that tent to give their head were all labor class. There's a water bearer. There is a craftsman. There's a whole bunch of these 5 people who go in, and each time the Guru comes out with a blood-soaked sword. And when he comes out the last time, he then brings out these people and says, these are the 5 people who have in fact given birth to a new order, the Khalsa. Now the Khalsa is a very interesting thing. The Khalsa, if you read Sikh history, transformed a loose federation of quarreling, warring, often with each other, within families, group, quite like the Punjabis are today, into a fighting force, into a military force, into an invincible military force. And Guru Gobind Singh's story is really interesting because at every point of building this military force against a tyrannical emperor, he paid with his own family's life. Let's cut a little ahead to the story. And we come to a point where there are again two boys, two of Guru Gobind Singh's sons, who have been thrown into a Thanda tower, right? And they have again been told, you must accept the allegiance of the emperor and his god, or you must die. What choice do you have? And I imagine in my book that Guru Gobind Singh, the warrior, because he himself had had so little childhood himself, perhaps would have struggled to write or sing lullabies to his sons, 4 of them. And these 2 boys are put into this, taken out of this, put into the Thanda tower. They wouldn't listen, taken out. And then what happens to them to teach them a lesson for not accepting the allegiance of the emperor? They are put between 2 progressively being built walls of bricks and bricked alive. And those boys, till the last breath, say, Bole so nihal, Sat Sri Akal. When all his sons are dead, Guru Gobind Singh is told by a messenger that you have nothing left. Your army is gone. Your sons are dead, all of them. There is no reason for you to live. And that's why I find him very interesting. He proceeds to write a letter. This letter is called Zafarnama. For anybody who's read Sikh history, you will know that this great letter is called Zafarnama. In that letter written to Aurangzeb, Guru Gobind Singh begins by saying, I am willing to come halfway if you're willing to come halfway. And as you read that letter, it's a beautiful letter. You should really read it. All of you should read it at some point. At some point, as he goes along, he talks about how at each time he wanted to, ask for peace, he tried to strive for peace, he was attacked again and again. And at one point he says, you think that you have killed my sons, and then there is nobody else to fight this battle. And he says, but you have forgotten that even when the children of the cobra snake are dead, there is still the coiled cobra alive and willing to strike. And this is that letter that was sent to Aurangzeb. He's a fascinating man because when he's finally going to meet Aurangzeb, and he heads out for the Deccan, the end of his career, on the way he is told that the emperor is dead and the new emperor has come about. So he proceeds to try and make peace and so on and so forth. But even there, even in the Deccan, he goes up to a cave and there is a man who we today know as Banda Bahadur. One of the most interesting conversations, I always think of Indian history in these conversations. One very interesting conversation to me is the question Vivekananda asks his master, which is, have you seen God? And can you show me? The other really interesting conversation is the one Guru Gobind Singh has with Banda Bahadur, who's essentially a bit like Vivekananda, happy meditating in his cave. And Guru Gobind Singh says to him, why on earth are you sitting and meditating in your cave? And he says, what do you mean? You are a spiritual master. You understand why I'm doing this. I'm just sitting and meditating and I want to reach the understanding of God. And Guru Gobind Singh says to him that, but there is no God without justice. You cannot get God without a sense of justice. And as long as you do not fight for justice, there can be no God. What happens after that? Banda Bahadur, of course, becomes Banda Bahadur. he comes out of his cave and leads the Sikh armies into the Punjab to fight back. And we will come to his story another day. But I want to end my talk by telling you a couple of things about Guru Gobind Singh, which I find really interesting. One, of course, is the story of the sparrow and the hawk, which many of you know, his great statement that he will teach the Sikhs who are the sparrows in his imagination, to fight the hawks. But how? What I find really interesting about his story is the legend making around him. The fact that he supposedly always wore blue. The fact that even the color of his horse, some have said, was blue, which I find difficult to believe, but I love the myth-making that has happened around him. Even today when you go to YouTube, you will see that there are Punjabi boys, and I find this cute, who have tried to read all these books to find out what is the power of the bow of Guru Gobind Singh, because they say no one could actually pick it up and pull the bow, right? The same is said about Arjun. No one could pick up his bow and put the arrow and fire it. So there are these boys who have created these machine bows, and they have a lever which pulls back the arrow, and they're trying to measure in this YouTube video how far the arrow goes and if they can get it right. I mean, you have to give it to the Punjabis, right? I mean, the Bongs would never think of this. This is really amazing. You have to give it to them. But in the end, I find it very interesting because Guru Gobind Singh, when he's putting together the Khalsa, like I told you, I imagined that he couldn't write a lullaby for his children. And then I imagined to myself that perhaps the only time he could actually write a lullaby, and allow me to read that bit if I can find it in the book for you, was when his sons are dead. And that's the only time he's able to write a lullaby. And this is the lullaby I imagined the Guru actually writing for his dead sons. The moon that rocks your cradle wraps you in divine light. When you awake, my child, remember that the Sikh does not know fright. The wooden toys that make you laugh, the lion, the hawk, the goat, the sparrow, will one day melt away for the bow and the arrow. But no weapon, my child, can give you what prayer might. So remember him always, and remember that the Sikh does not know fright. This idea of not knowing fear is a great tale for me in the Guru Gobind Singh story. I think, taking off from what Sanjeev was saying and many others have been saying before this, I think the great failure of the Indian imagination in the 21st century has been that we have forgotten that we were once brave. The idea that we had courage of a particular kind has been lost to us. And we need to regain it. And by courage, I don't only mean military courage like Guru Gobind Singh, but I'm of course also thinking of Gandhi's courage. And I'm also thinking of Veer Savarkar's courage. Remember, he's the only one, we forget, he's the only one of the bigger ones, the leaders, who spent his time in Kalapani, not in wonderful little, bungalows in the hills as prisons. He spent his time in Kalapani, right? You put Gandhi in Kalapani, and then I would like to see what Gandhi would write. Right? It's very interesting. So we have to see our history and I'm thinking of Gandhi's courage too. So we have forgotten this idea of courage in our history. And I think the greatest example, or one of the greatest examples of courage, true bravery, is given by Guru Gobind Singh, because till the end, how does he die? Of course, he's stabbed again, by mercenaries. But one legend says that he died when somebody came to him and said, what are your Sikhs and Khalsa? They can't even pick up your bow and string or arrow. And then the most fiercest warriors in the Sikh tribe are called, and they try to pick his bow and arrow, and they can't do it. Finally, the injured Guru picks up his bow with one hand and strings the arrow, and his stitches burst. Right? And then he's lying on his deathbed, where the Sikhs are saying, but what will we do without you? You're gone, and then who will lead us? And like everybody who has ever lived in a large joint family in India, including the Punjabis, he knows it's a bad idea to pass it on to your children, right? He knows what happens when you do that. So I think he's also a really clever man. He says, after me, there's the book. Please stick to the book. Don't quarrel. Right? I think he's a great man. He's a really wonderful man. He knows that if I leave this to my children and my nephews and nieces and this, that, and the other, there's going to be fighting. Anyway, I have no children left. That's another thing. So leave it to the book. But his entire story till the end gives us the resonance of courage, which I think many in India, or at least we in India, at least here in this city, have lost. That whenever the call comes, right, whenever the danger calls, that there is only one response to be given, which is Bole So Nihal, Sat Sri Akal.